Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a great day. Today folks, I want to talk to you about something that is a little different, and I want to discuss the differences between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Steam Deck. Now some of you are immediately going to think, wait a minute, the Switch 2 isn't even out. How are you going to be able to compare the two? What I want to do is give you my opinion as somebody who has had both a Switch and Steam Deck, and now that I've seen the offer of the Switch 2, I want to give you my feelings on it and if I think it's going to justify its price tag over getting something like a Steam Deck. Now, to quell fears for just a moment, I know for a fact that if somebody is in the running for a family-friendly system, I know the Nintendo Switch is immediately going to stick out. There's going to be a lower barrier to entry, and reasonably, it's going to be the thing that most people gravitate towards when it comes to the overall thing. But I'm talking specifically to the folk that have been playing games for a very long time. It is a strong hobby of theirs, and maybe you have a gaming PC, maybe you have a console, maybe you are looking to try something new. I'm talking to you folks, the folks that play a ton of different stuff. Hate to use this term, but essentially the real gamers, the actual people that are engaged in the hobby through and through. Now, what I'm going to do right off the bat is I'm going to give you my answer, but as soon as I give you my answer, what I want to do is I want to explain my reasoning behind it. Immediately off the bat, I do not think you should buy a Nintendo Switch 2. Now, yes, I can already hear people yelling at me and saying, well, what about Mario Kart? What about Dusk Bloods? What about Metroid Prime 4? Hold your horses for just a moment, put away the pitchforks, let me explain. While the Switch 2 has a lot of power, and frankly for the price of the system, assuming that we still get it for the $450 price tag, I do think it is a really great deal for the system itself. The power on offer, the amount of different customizations, and the Joy-Cons themselves, all of the things about the console I think is stellar. But where I find a lot of my problems lie with the Switch 2 is in the amount of additional purchases that you are going to have to make as a consumer to really get the most out of your Switch 2, specifically at the immediate outset of the system when you first go to buy it. And then also, I want you to think about the next 7 years and how much money you are about to spend. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be cheap. Let's do some quick math. So if you decide to go and buy a Switch 2, assuming that the tariffs do not change the price here in the US, you are looking at $450 US. That is base system alone. If you do get the pack-in with Mario Kart World, that is going to be $499, essentially $500. And then let's assume you're going to add a micro SD card on top of that, but do remember it has to be the Express micro SD card. That's also going to run you another $50 or so, and that's to make sure that you can actually store your games. So without any other game purchases, without any other case, without any other controllers, you are looking at about $550 if you get the Mario Kart bundle with a memory card. That is no small chunk of change. I do want you to keep in mind that a Steam Deck runs at $399 for the base model. In addition, the PS5 is now down to about $399 for a disc version, and an Xbox Series S, I say S instead of X because the S I believe is down to about $250 to about $300. So I want to put things in perspective about what you could be utilizing your money for there. Now, let's say you did decide to go with the Switch 2. Once we talk about the price and you talk about what you're actually getting, you're going to be able to utilize your old Switch games, so that is a plus. If you already have a Switch library, they have already made a bunch of Switch games over the course of the last 8 years, so you're not missing out in terms of your replayability for those. However, if you have sold your Switch, or if you would have to start from the ground up again, if you had a lot of your games physically and now you're looking to get back into Nintendo's ecosystem, you will have to rebuy those. And I do want to throw out that they are making those games remastered on some of them. However, they are charging upwards of $79.99. You heard me correctly, they are charging $80 for 8-year-old games like Breath of the Wild. Now, here's the problem with the game prices. The game prices are not exclusive to old titles. They are going to be the new standard going forward. Somehow something like Donkey Kong Bonanza has managed to subvert this, but games like Mario Kart World, Dusk Bloods, Metroid Prime 4, and other Switch 2 exclusives, including ports of already existing games on other platforms, are going to run you $80. Now, I don't think I need to explain why this is such a big problem, but I really want to put something in perspective. A game like Baldur's Gate 3 that came out about 2 years ago now, which gives you hundreds of hours of content, a ton of replayability, launched at $70. Now, if you wanted to go and buy Baldur's Gate 3 now, you would be able to go and pick it up for about $50, sometimes $47, depends on the sale price, but it does go on sale enough that you can typically get it for about $20 cheaper. It does hold its value a little bit more than most games, but if you did go to get it, you could get it for about $50. However, if you were to go and buy a Nintendo game tomorrow, you would be paying the same price that Nintendo game launched for 8 years ago. Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, those games are still selling for $60. Switch 2 games are going to launch at $80, and unless there is a small or slight sale in a couple years, you are going to be paying $80 every single time you want to go play a Nintendo game. I really want to stress how ludicrous this is. There are so many games that you can play. You have such little time in your day-to-day life to play a video game. It is not worth $80. Now, of course, that is me speaking personally. I am a little cheap on some things. However, I do not believe that $80 is a good value for a video game when I can go out and for $30 less get something like Baldur's Gate 3. Which the Switch 2 does not have a port of, because every single game that is going to get ported to Switch 2 is going to have to make sure the system can run it. So yes, it will be nice that the Switch 2 is more powerful, but you need to consider ports like Cyberpunk 2077. You are getting a downgraded version of this game and you are paying more for it. Cyberpunk 2077 is going to launch at $70 on the Switch 2, but it's going to run at about half of the performance that you could get on a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. It's going to run about as well as it does on a Steam Deck, which admittedly it doesn't run fantastically on a Steam Deck in my personal opinion, but I have seen it run decent on a Steam Deck, and that's about the performance you're going to get on a Switch 2. But you are going to be forced to pay more for that experience. What I'm really trying to get to the point of here is that the price to performance and the price for the games that you're going to be forced to pay on Switch 2 is not only going to be exorbitant, but they are going to give you a less powerful experience, yet they are going to charge you more. Now, yes, the Nintendo games are going to run great. They're going to be well optimized and they're going to be awesome. But I want you to think about this as well. The Nintendo game that comes out every couple months is going to cost you $80. If 6 Nintendo games come out in a year span and you buy every single one brand new pre-tax, you are looking at $480. $480 for 6 games. That is more expensive than the base level Steam Deck. That is more expensive than a PS5 with a controller. That is the price of a brand new TV. And even if this game that you buy in those 6 that release, even if one of them is incredible and a masterpiece, it's still $400 for the other 5 that you just kind of liked. For me personally, the value proposition of Nintendo is not there. Regardless of the games that release on it, the big push for them this time around is the power of the system and the reliance on third parties, which doesn't really matter if you go the route of a handheld gaming PC. And here's why. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate you actually listening to my argument here. But what I want to stress is if you are considering a Switch 2, but you do not want to pay those prices, listen to me now. You should be considering a handheld gaming PC. Now, there are a ton of handheld gaming PCs you can choose from. The market is very saturated with them right now. Well, I won't say very saturated, but there is quite a few that you can choose from that are all very quality and they have a lot of options to them. However, the one that is the best bang for my buck personally is the Steam Deck. We've done the price breakdown for the Switch 2. I want to give you a price breakdown on something like a Steam Deck. So if you were to price break down the Steam Deck, you are looking at a bare entry of $399. Now, not only is this much cheaper than the Switch 2, but it also gives you an immediate value out the gate of having Steam installed on the system, because Steam has been around for 20 plus years at this point, and the amount of support and the amount of community that has grown there since has just been astounding to watch. Not to mention the amount of backwards compatibility through Steam alone is absolutely insane value. If you have any Steam game in your library right now, even if you only have 20 games, you have 20 games available for your Steam Deck. Now, of course, there's going to be the argument that somebody could make that maybe some of those games are not supported, or maybe they don't play properly, but if you own a Steam game, you can still access it via a gaming PC or PC in general. Which, if you have a ton of games in your library already, let's say you have Skyrim, Fallout, Baldur's Gate 3, Dynasty Warriors, Doom, and the Batman Arkham games. All those games are playable on a Steam Deck. And it not only would not cost you anything to run them, but you will get better performance on some of those than you may have previously gotten on other gaming PCs. The value proposition of you owning a Steam Deck is astounding, because you get all of these games, and if you already own them, you pay nothing. You already have them. So your only cost is going to be the cost of your Steam Deck. Now, if you do want to purchase other games, games are significantly cheaper on PC than they would be on most consoles. For example, I wanted to buy Space Marine 2. I really wanted to play it. I didn't want to spend $70 when it came out, so I waited for it to go on sale. I found it on sale on CD Keys for about $37 or so for that price, and was able to play it within the night. And surprisingly to me, it ran really well on Steam Deck. Plus, Valve is consistently updating the Steam Deck almost every couple weeks, if not every week, just to make sure that it has ironed out any bugs or problems or considerable issues that it would have. The other nice thing is you can dock a Steam Deck to a TV, which I often do. I play a lot of my games that way. And you can pair your PS5 DualSense or your Xbox Series controller to it, which means if you already own a controller, then you do not have to pay any more than the price of the system. The beauty of this is that Steam Deck takes out a lot of barrier to entry when it comes to the pricing of things, because everything that you need to play a game with the Steam Deck is already built in. If you already own the game, you pay nothing new. If there is a new game coming out that you want to buy, you buy that new game, or maybe look for a sale on a CD key site, and then you have that game at a cheaper price. The Steam Deck alleviates so much money that you will be wasting and spending on a Switch 2. It's just kind of crazy how much money you're actually putting down for Nintendo. Now, I won't pretend like Steam Deck has no drawbacks, because certain games just don't function as well as they could, or maybe even should. Going back to Cyberpunk, I don't particularly love the way it performs, but if that is your only option to playing it, it is certainly better to play it on a Steam Deck, because you'll be getting the same experience as you would on a Switch 2, roughly. And more specifically, I'd like to point out that if you do play it on Steam Deck or PC, then your saves do transfer between. Meaning any game that you play on your PC or any game that you play in your Steam Deck, those saves are going to transfer to each one. You also do not have to pay the online subscription to use things like Discord, or to use things like playing online or chatting with people. And one of the coolest features as well is that PlayStation and Xbox both have been putting a ton of their exclusives on the Steam store. Meaning if you want to play a brand new PlayStation or Xbox exclusive, you'll most likely be able to do it on a Steam Deck. Not only are a lot of PlayStation and Xbox exclusives not available on Nintendo systems, but frankly, it just can't really run them. A game like Last of Us 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Halo, Hellblade 2, those are all games you can play on the Steam Deck that you are not able to play on a Nintendo system. I think you kind of understand my point, so I won't hammer it home too much more, but what I really want to leave you with is, if you are somebody who is conscious at all about price, you really should be considering these things, because it's not just the price that goes into this argument. It's the idea that you are getting so many quality of life features and not having to pay for them on something like a Steam Deck. Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, they want to charge you for so many of the features that you use every day. However, Valve still to this day, for however much money it rakes in, it gives back to the player by not needing you to pay pricing for these things. Now, there is a possibility that Switch 2 is going to be a bit more powerful than the Steam Deck. I'm not 100% sure, and I didn't want to include that in my argument for the case that it might be true or it might not. However, if it is true, it is possible that Valve is also working on a Steam Deck 2 with the wild success of the original, which if is the case, it's going to be significantly more powerful than the Switch 2. The ultimate thing you need to keep in mind if you're trying to decide between these two things here is that the library of games you will have access to on a Steam Deck is so much bigger than Nintendo will ever be able to allow you. And not only is the library bigger, but the game base is cheaper. The beauty of it being cheaper also is that the quality of games is still there. You can still play things like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3 on a Steam Deck. You cannot play any of those except for Cyberpunk on a Switch 2 unless you pay $70. If you already own it on Steam, you can already play it on your Steam Deck. Now, I know I've talked a ton about Steam Deck in this specific scenario, but what I want to end with is if you are choosing between a Switch 2 and a handheld gaming PC, I urge you, even if it's not a Steam Deck, consider a handheld gaming PC. You have so many more options. If you are willing to learn even just a little bit of how to operate it properly, you have a whole world opened up to you. The beauty of the Steam Deck is how simple it is to use and how easy and user-friendly it is, but if you're willing to go above and beyond, you can do so much with gaming handhelds. I also do a lot of emulation on mine as well. I can play games all the way back to Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, PlayStation 1 through 3, I believe, and then it really just depends on what you want from the system. However much time you're willing to put in, it will give you back. And at the end of the day, that's really the whole point of this argument, is get what is worth it to you. If the Nintendo Switch 2 and spending $450 for the system and then going out and spending $480 on 6 Switch games sounds good to you, maybe that is the best option for you. Don't let me tell you how to spend your money, but what I will do is if I can help you, I would be more than happy to. And with that, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful and informative. I did my best to really try and cover a ton of different bases with this. It is a lot of information to take in, but I really want you to understand the value proposition for the things that you are looking at. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please leave them below. I'd love to know and share with the community. Make sure that everybody knows the right answers for the right things. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a thumbs up and subbing to the channel. I hope to do more content like this in the future. And with that being said, guys, I appreciate you and I'll see you next time.